A site like this in your backyard isn't just beautiful, it also means apples in the fall.
Now, to achieve that, you have to plant an apple tree or learn how to take good care of an old one. I'm Barbara Damrosch.
And I'm Elliot Coleman. Stick with us for the next half hour and we'll show you some of the secrets of natural tree care and take you to visit an expert organic orchardist.
On Gardening Naturally.
Hi, Steve. Hi, Elliot. I thought I'd find you in the orchard.
Well, I'm just getting my last pruning done for the year.
Ah, it's a great spot. It's good to see you again. It's been a while.
Good to see you.
This looks wonderful.
Thanks.
How many trees do you have here?
Just over 600 now, on 1 acre of land.
600 trees. Well, on the assumption that what works for you here on the large scale should work for homeowners on the small scale, let's talk about what you're doing.
Sure.
Why are there white paint on the bark there?
The white paint I put on the young trees because it reflects the sunlight in the winter, and it keeps the bark from getting hot and cold and hot and cold and splitting. And split bark will definitely harm the tree.
These trees are how old here?
These trees are 4 years old, these ones right here. They're just coming into their prime.
And those are younger ones up there?
Yeah, up the hill we have younger trees.
Let's go look at those. Now, these don't have as many branches. I see they're tied up. Is this because the roots are weak?
Well, they're dwarf trees, and what that means is that the roots are weak, and they would blow over or tip over in a windstorm if they weren't tied up.
But the advantage of a dwarf tree is that they're not going to get so tall you need a ladder to pick them.
Exactly. That's as tall as they're going to get right there.
Isn't that nice? And the mulch here, what's going on with this, Steve?
The mulch, I really like mulch. Mulch provides nutrients, keeps some moisture in the soil. I look at this mulch and I pull it aside and I look at the soil underneath there. And
oh, I see an earthworm right away. You can tell it's healthy in there.
Millions of them. Look at them. No, that is beautiful soil, and it's because of the mulch.
And that's what the trees like to grow in.
That's right.
And now we get up here further in the 2-year-old trees. Now this is a nice little one. What did this start out looking like when you planted it?
This was just a stick when we planted it. It was that high and had no branches on it.
And all this has come on since last year?
Yeah, that's last year's growth right there.
With some training, too. Well, let's move on over here and let's go see what they look like when we first put them into the ground. There's a nice-looking tree, Steve. How long ago was this one put in?
We planted this about 2 weeks ago.
Boy, you can see the great growth on it. Of course, the great growth is because the soil is fertile. What did you do to make this so nice?
The whole area has been prepared with green manures, but in this particular row, we added an extra crop of buckwheat and tilled it in last summer.
And that's giving you a soil, same thing you do if you were planting vegetables.
That's right.
Making it fertile before you put in the crop, although with apples, I guess you only get one chance here.
That's true.
This bump down here, this is the joint between the dwarfing rootstock and the variety of the tree you want to grow.
That's right.
Just what is a dwarfing rootstock?
Well, a dwarfing rootstock is a rootstock. It's an apple tree that has a very compact root system. Because the root system itself is very small and compact, it keeps the tree compact as it grows.
Sounds like a good system. And this needs to be above ground, this point?
That's right. If the upper part here was below ground, this would send out roots, and the tree would become a standard tree, 35 feet high. So you always want to keep that dwarfing rootstock, or semi-dwarf rootstock, above the ground level.
Well, why don't we plant one so we can see exactly how this is done?
Sure.
Well, we have a tree here soaking in a bucket of water so the roots don't dry out while we get ready to plant it. Okay, what do you do next?
Okay. Basically, I identify where the graft union is, and here it's very obvious where this variety has been grafted onto the rootstock. And I'll just place it in the hole here so that the roots are spread out, and the interstem here between the variety and the rootstock is above the ground level.
Mm-hmm. You can see that, yeah.
And then simply a matter of very loosely putting the dirt in while keeping the roots spread out. You can see how I spread the roots out as I plant it.
With your hands, right,
With
to
my
make sure that they're not all pushed into
That's
a
right.
little tube in the bottom there.
That's right, and they'll want to go out at different levels also. They're lower roots and upper roots. That's right. That's right. Make sure your roots are going out at the layer which they grow on the rootstock. And every now and then, just make sure they're spread out equally.
And this gives the tree the type of care that's going to help it to grow as healthily as possible.
That's right.
Once it's established in the orchard.
And even as you go, you'll see, you pull some roots out and make sure they get spread out nicely. I try to keep grass and witch grass out of the hole.
Now, that was a pretty small hole. I remember reading years ago that you should dig a really huge hole and fill it with all sorts of peat moss and other things. But the new information is that you shouldn't do that. You should let the tree understand that this is where it's living, and
That's right.
It has to...
The important thing is to keep this area outside fertile so that the roots don't just stay in that hole, but actually go out into the surrounding area.
Okay, Steve, now that the tree's in the ground, what would be your next steps? The thing I always try and remember at this point is to take off the tag, so later this summer when the trunk expands, it isn't going to get choked by this thing being around it.
Good point. Always have to do that. Next thing I do is prune it up, shape it up a little bit, and then water it.
Mm-hmm. Show me how you'd prune.
Well, I take these two major branches off first. They look nice, but they're too much for the roots to support this first season. So I'd take these two off, and then I'd top it off to a strong bud up here on top.
And that would give us that stick that you talked about.
Whip.
Which bud and why?
Well, I take it off to this lower bud. There are three strong buds here on top. And I prefer to cut it off to the lower one so that the other strong buds don't compete with that one. There are no strong buds below that bottom bud.
I see. So you come down to here, and then that's the bud that's going to grow on up into the tall tree.
That's right.
Okay, let's go for it.
Okay. These are the easy ones down here. I prune them back a little bit away from the trunk. I don't try to prune them too close to the trunk. Don't want to leave a long stub either. And then this one, I try to cut back maybe a 1/4 inch above the bud.
If you get too close to the bud, it's going to make it harder for that thing to grow like we
you
wanted.
need a little room for it to heal there on top.
And the last thing is to put some water in the hole, I suppose?
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Is that just done today, or?
No.
I usually do it all the time for the first month or so.
Exactly. You want to water it at least 2 times a week for the first month. And then during the summer, anytime the soil appears to dry out, the more water you give it without drowning it, the better.
Right, because basically in the first year they're living mainly off water. Since pruning is an ongoing process, when we come back, we'll show you how to deal with this tree's pruning in its 2nd and 3rd years. Now, Steve, this tree was planted last year.
That's right, it's 2 years old.
And everything that's growing on here came out of that little stick we referred to before. Okay, what would you do to prune this?
A 2-year-old tree really needs very little pruning. It actually needs as much leaf area as possible.
Mm-hmm. It seems to have quite a bit. Would you take anything off?
Well, we had a little bit of winter kill here. You can see on the top where the top bud died back a little bit. I would prune back to a healthy bud here on top, maybe this one down here, and prune it off right there. That would form the main leader of the tree.
And maybe do the same on that one there.
There's another one here. This side branch killed back a little bit. Again, I don't want to take too much off, but just back to a healthy bud.
Now, an awful lot of people seem to think that pruning takes place in the winter when everything is dormant, and yet you're pruning when the leaves are green.
I would prune up to this point. One good thing about waiting to this point is you can actually see which buds are strong and which buds are not strong.
Makes sense. Okay, the following year, what happens? Now, this is a 3-year-old tree. Isn't this looking nice? Where would you begin on something like this?
Well, pruning is basically a process of elimination. In the first place, I always start is the dead wood. Here's a branch, for some reason it died back last year. I would take the dead branch off first.
Makes sense.
And then you look for things like an upward growing branch like this one right here. This is going to grow up into the body of the tree, and they don't tend to be as prolific as other branches.
Do they also crowd it and prevent air movement?
Right. That's right. You want to keep the tree open. Another thing I notice here is the end of this branch. There's a lot of competition going on here. There's an upward growing branch and some narrow forked branches here.
Mm-hmm.
Prune that back so you've got one main branch coming out the end there. and then that will form new leaves out here.
How about this crossing branch over here, Steve?
Yep, there's a case where these two branches are going to compete with each other. This branch is growing into this branch. As you get apples on there, that's going to come down and rub against there. So it's a choice. Which one do I want to take off? Hey, look at that flower bud. I couldn't take that off. I'll take that one off right there.
And that makes it a lot better.
Yeah.
And that up right there, too, I suppose.
Yep, there's another one. Oh, it goes on and on.
Okay, Steve, you're so good at this. Barbara and I have a number of 20-year-old neglected apple trees at our new house. Maybe you could come over and give us some pointers on how to make them look as nice as all of these?
Well, I'll give it a shot, Ellen.
All right, let's go do it. There are certain tools where it's really worth paying a little extra to get quality the first time you buy them. And that's because of the stresses that are put on the tool when using it. Pruners and loppers are a good example. If you look at these two loppers, you'll see how much thicker and stronger this one is compared to this one. And not only that, there are other nice features. This one has rubber bumpers, which cushion the effect of it coming together when you're using it, as opposed to the metal hitting metal on this. But what really happens to these, if you buy a less expensive pair, is that the blades eventually bend and deform, and it doesn't take long. And when I say stress, you're really putting a lot of stress on this. And what's happened to this one is that the blade has bent away from the anvil, and they're no longer cutting well. And that's no fun to use all day long. Now, the good models also come in long-handled ones like this. I love these around the property when I'm cutting brush. I can just reach down, stand up, and do a lot of heavy work. The same criteria we were talking about here is true of pruning shears. You want to make sure you have a good quality model so the blade is never going to bend away from the counter blade. Then they will cut really well. Again, a less expensive pair, and you get a separation between them, and you're going to be unhappy, you're going to replace them, and you might as well have purchased a better pair in the first place. There are models for people with smaller hands, and there are also models for lefties if you enjoy using your left hand for pruning. Good ones also will offer you a sharpening kit, because remember, these things are made to cut, and no tool's going to cut unless it's sharp. How do you sharpen it? You just take this and sharpen the cutting blade, keeping it as a chisel, remembering that the sharp edge wants to be right next to the counter blade. If you're at all uncomfortable about that, read the instructions that come with this or the instructions with the sharpening kit. A sharp tool is going to cut for you, and cut for you well. Now, when you're doing an apple tree, some of those branches you're going to prune may be up high, so here's a great idea. This is a Longreach Pruner. You're working down here, it's working up there, and you can reach up and do all your work without getting on a ladder. With your feet on terra firma and getting the pruning done at the same time, you may be a lot more comfortable. Hi, Barbara. I brought Steve Page over to help us with the pruning.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, welcome. Nice to see you.
Good to meet you. Looks like you're doing the right thing here. I like to see someone fertilizing their tree before they start pruning.
Yeah, I thought I'd get some lime around it.
Yeah? Yeah, and then you're going to mulch it?
Yeah, I've got some hay over here.
You know, unlike in Steve's orchard, Barbara, where the trees are young, and he put the hay right near the trunks to keep the weeds down, it's a different game here in a large orchard.
Yeah.
Right, Steve?
Yeah, you want to keep your hay mulch out around the perimeter of the tree where the feeding roots are.
I would say you could almost look at the end of the branches, which is called the drip line, and get it all the way out to the drip line, and that's where it's going to do the tree the most good.
Maybe out even a little further than where you put it there. You know, one way I gauge the health of a tree is to look at the growth of a new year. And there you've got about 12 inches of new growth on it. That's a good sign. That shows these trees are in good basic health, and the pruning won't hurt it one bit. If I didn't see any new growth, say if all the branches looked like this and there wasn't any new growth on it, I'd be concerned about pruning them too heavily. I'd feed it first, mulch it, and then prune it after it came back to a vigorous state of health.
And that would be after a year or so. You let it go for a year or two.
Let it go for a year.
Some growth back in it. Yeah,
feed it up.
Show us what you would do then on a tree like this. Where would you start? How would you begin?
What I like to do is open up the inside, the center of the tree first, and let the sunlight in and the air circulation around. You'll find your best quality sunlight. So I'd start up here. There's a crossing branch right there, and another one right here that's just crowding out that up there, so I'd take those off.
So if the air gets in, that's important to prevent disease and
That's
things
right.
like that.
Dry
Keep
things out quick,
moving.
keep it dry. You know, these are water sprouts here.
Oh, yeah.
These, I'd take those out right away. Just get them out of there. They're never going to amount to anything. Another one here further along the branch. They just grow straight up.
Yep.
And they'll crowd out the rest of the tree.
And cause problem with structure later on.
Anything that's too big to prune off with my hand pruners, I use a saw on. Just
Also makes you taller, Steve.
It does. Extends my reach quite a bit. Well, that's easy.
That looks much better.
And there's one. Just clip out with the hand pruners.
Oh,
There's another one behind you here.
yeah. Okay,
Crossing
sure.
branch.
I can take that one out.
It's kind of crowding this section of the tree over there.
Yeah.
Oh, that really opens it up.
It does.
Yeah, you can just see how much better the air gets
Yep.
through there after that point.
You'll have much better quality apples on that end of the branch.
Well, Steve, now that we've limed the soil, we've spread some mulch, and we're working on pruning the tree, what other practices do you use in order to not need pesticides in the orchard?
Well, Elliott, pests are always going to be a problem. Insects and disease always like apple trees. I think you're doing the right thing by fertilizing the tree. The lime and the mulch is going to help the tree be healthier. You're feeding the soil, and it will naturally resist insects. There are some other tricks you can use, though.
Well, we've used those red sticky ball traps.
Yeah.
Those are good.
Yep, they are.
This one over there, look.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's a great thing to discuss. The red color is particularly important because it attracts insects.
That's right. It attracts the adult female apple maggot fly. She's attracted because she thinks it's an apple that she can lay her eggs in. So she gets stuck on the sticky part just like a flypaper.
That's right, flypaper for apple pests. And you can see them all over there, and even though there isn't an apple around,
That's right.
it still gets the early generations that make a difference.
That's right.
That's
Yeah,
great.
They do.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Well-
You've been a great help on these things. You want to help
Great.
us finish up the tree?
Hey, I've got some more pruning to do here.
Okay.
I'll get back to my mulching. Thanks.
After Barbara and I harvest this nice crop of apples, we're not going to forget about the apple trees. We're going to come back out here with a few bird feeders like this, filled with sunflower seeds, and hang them around the orchard. The whole idea is to attract more birds than would normally spend the winter here. Chickadees, finches, nuthatches, and while they're not eating these seeds, they'll be wandering around the trees, pecking in and under the bark, finding pest insects. A small investment in sunflower seeds, and you can guarantee yourself a winter-long orchard pest patrol.
You know, Elliot, if I were to name the perfect ornamental tree, I think it would be a crabapple. There's so many good reasons to plant crab apples. Beautiful flowers in different colors, white, pink, red, wonderful little fruits that the birds eat and that you can make jelly out of. It's also just a very good sized tree for a yard. It doesn't get too huge, and it has a kind of dappled sunlight under it that a lot of plants like to grow in.
From my point of view, it has one other virtue. Because of all these flowers, crab apples attract bees. And in the flowers is plenty of pollen. And if you have other apple trees in your yard, they may not have enough pollen to interact and pollinate each other, but the pollen from one crab apple will cover the whole spectrum, and you'll really have the best possible apple pollinating conditions you could ever have.
A crabapple is just a broad term for any apple tree with itty-bitty fruits. They more closely resemble the wild apples from which our modern large-fruited apples come. You know, the crab apples tend to be winter hardy, much more so than large-fruited apples.
Well, that's why I'd like to grow them up north, because it's a tree I can depend on, and when I need that pollen for the other apple trees, I can be sure I'm going to get it.
Another good reason to grow crab apples.
Absolutely.
It's time for apple pie.
Boy, they're certainly beautiful enough. I've been picking apples for years, from abandoned orchards and from my own minimal care trees. I've always noticed that there are plenty of nice ones. In fact, about 50 or 60% of them are going to be so nice you could put them in poly bags and sell them. There's maybe another 30% with a small flaw, but they make great cider. And only about 10% are wasted. There are all sorts of aids, natural balances in the system around us that's helping protect these trees.
And fruit trees are also such wonderful landscaping choices for the average small yard. Apple would be the great one to start with. It has everything, beautiful flowers in the springtime and great fruits in the fall. And even the winter look is great with that graceful shape, sometimes outlined in snow.
So choose the right variety for your area, give it minimal care, and you can grow apples in your yard without any chemicals at all. Give it a try. And so for now, goodbye and good gardening.
If you're interested in finding out more about growing fruit trees with few or no pesticides, here's a book we found really helpful. Steve co-authored it. It's called the Orchard Almanac, and you can get it from Spray Saver Publications in Rockport, Maine.
Next on TLC, get started on easy home projects that anyone can handle here on Homebodies. Then indulge your creative side with Debbie Stapley on Crafts & Company here on TLC.